Welcome the night and its dreams. The sky was gray. The wind blew cold gusts on the afternoon of the funeral. Under the shade of an old tree, a group of people stood silently around the coffin in the middle of the cemetery. Everyone bowed their heads, their eyes filled with tears. In that quiet space, the loud barking of a dog broke the solemn atmosphere. It was Lucky, Mr. Hun's loyal dog, who had just passed away suddenly from a heart attack. Lucky ran around the coffin, his eyes glistening with tears. He barked continuously, not fiercely, but as if he was trying to say something. People whispered that Lucky was just missing his owner, but if they looked more closely, they would see something unusual in that barking, like a plea, like a choked cry. Mr. Hun was a quiet man, living alone with Lucky after his wife passed away. This dog was his only friend, always by his side, everywhere, all the time. 2 weeks before his death, Lucky began to act strangely. He refused to eat, often stood in front of the door and barked at the old warehouse. Mr. Hun did not pay attention, thinking that Lucky was just sick or bored. The day Mr. Hun passed away, people found him collapsed in that warehouse. After the funeral, everyone closed the warehouse and no one mentioned it again. But Lucky kept looking in that direction, as if trying to pull everyone back. Today, Lucky's barking became more intense. He jumped on the coffin, scratching with his feet, his eyes begging for everyone's attention. A relative was annoyed and tried to pull him away, but Mr. Hun's granddaughter, Lan, spoke up. "Wait, maybe Lucky is trying to say something." Lan bent down, petted Lucky, then suddenly remembered the warehouse. She spoke, half doubtful, half worried. "Could it be? There's something in the warehouse that Grandpa wants us to know?" Curiosity spread. A few people and Lan entered the warehouse, where everything was still covered in dust and desolate. In a dark corner, they discovered an old, locked wooden box. After picking the lock, they were stunned to see inside a stack of papers and a handwritten letter from Mr. Hung. In the letter, he said that he had discovered that he was seriously ill, but did not want to tell anyone, because he did not want to become a burden. The stack of papers in the box was the property he left to his children and grandchildren, a large piece of land that he had bought a long time ago but had not yet had time to make public. Lucky somehow sensed this. It was not only a loyal dog, but also Mr. Hun's last voice, helping the family find the truth. When everyone returned, Lucky stopped barking, quietly lying next to Mr. Hun's coffin. Its eyes were closed, as if it had completed its final mission. Everyone's hearts suddenly tightened. If they had known earlier, they would not have blamed the dog. That afternoon, as the sun gradually set, Lucky still lay quietly beside Mr. Hung, as a farewell and eternal gratitude. The afternoon gradually became colder. The last rays of sunlight seemed to be sinking into the horizon. Everyone around suddenly realized that Lucky had been lying motionless next to the coffin since the wooden box was found. The barking was gone, replaced by absolute silence. Lucky's sad eyes were half closed, his thin body shaking slightly with each weak breath. Lan bent down, stroking Lucky's head. "Are you tired?" she whispered, tears streaming down. Lucky gently looked up at her. His eyes seemed to shine with a bit of peace, but he still did not leave Mr. Hung's coffin. After the funeral, everyone decided to take Lucky home to take care of him. But strangely, Lucky refused to leave the cemetery. No matter who carried him away, he would find a way to come back, lying right next to Mr. Hun's grave, his eyes looking far away, as if waiting for something. Lan could not bear to leave Lucky alone. She decided to come and sit next to him every day, bringing food and water. At first, Lucky did not eat, just lay quietly. But gradually, thanks to Lan's persistence, Lucky began to eat little by little. One afternoon, in the fading sunset, Lan suddenly realized something unusual. Lucky was not just lying there because he missed Mr. Hung. He also looked up at the sky, his ears perked up as if he was listening. Lan asked softly, "Lucky, are you waiting for your grandfather?" Lucky responded with a soft groan. He rubbed his head against Lan's leg as if in agreement. She hugged him, feeling the small but loving warmth. As time passed, Lan's family began to deal with the property that Mr. Hung left behind. The piece of land they found in the box turned out to be much more valuable than expected. Thanks to that, the family not only overcame financial difficulties, but also had the opportunity to fulfill Mr. Hung's unfinished dream to build a small school for poor children. During that time, Lucky remained a silent witness. It fulfilled its responsibility as a friend, not only while Mr. Hung was still alive, but also after he had passed away. Then one cold winter day, Lan went to the cemetery as usual, bringing food for Lucky. But this time, Lucky did not run out to greet her. It lay still next to Mr. Hung's grave, its body curled up, as if it was in a deep sleep. Lan quickly ran over, calling its name in panic, but Lucky did not respond. In Lan's arms, Lucky still kept a peaceful smile on its small face. It had stayed with Mr. Hung until the last moment. Lan's family decided to bury Lucky next to Mr. Hung. They erected a small still with the words, "Lucky, Mr. Hung's loyal friend, silent protector." When telling this story, Lan could not hide her emotions. She often told the people around her, Lucky is not just a dog. It is a part of the family, a bond of love, faith, and hope that her grandfather left behind. Under the full moon, the cemetery was still quiet. But in the night wind, people could still feel a small bark somewhere, not because of sadness, but like a warm farewell. As time passed, the cemetery where Mr. Hung and Lucky rested gradually became a special place in Lan's family's heart. Every year, on Mr. Hung's death anniversary, the whole family came here together. But every time, they not only burned incense for Mr. Hung, but also placed a small bouquet of flowers next to Lucky's grave. Lan, now an adult, became a teacher at the small school her family built from Mr. Hung's legacy. Every day, she still told her students the story of Lucky, not just to talk about the loyalty of a dog, but to emphasize the lesson of connection and love, that love does not only exist between humans, but also spreads to all creatures around us. One day, Lan and a few students went to the cemetery to clean up. While taking care of Lucky's grave, a boy in the group suddenly spoke up. "Miss Lan, do you think Lucky knows how much your grandfather loved him?" Lan looked into the boy's clear eyes, suddenly remembering the days when Lucky always persistently barked at Mr. Hung's coffin. She smiled gently and replied, "I think Lucky knows very well. That's why he did everything to help us understand the love that our grandfather left behind." The boy nodded, then placed a small white flower on Lucky's grave. A gentle wind blew, shaking the surrounding trees, as if nature was in agreement with Lan's words. But the story did not stop there. One autumn evening, when Lan was teaching in class, a heavy rain suddenly came. She quickly stopped the lesson, pulled the curtains to make sure the students wouldn't get cold. The moment she looked up at the schoolyard, she was stunned. Under the dim light of the street lamp, Lan saw a familiar figure, the image of Lucky, standing silently in the middle of the schoolyard, his eyes sparkling, looking straight at the classroom. She rubbed her eyes, trying to convince herself that it was just an illusion. But that image was so real. Lan stepped out of the classroom, the cold rain seeping through her shirt. When she got closer, that figure disappeared, but a warm feeling filled her heart. She suddenly understood that Lucky was always by her side, watching and protecting her like before. From that day on, Lan often felt like there was something special present in the school. The laughter of the students echoed throughout the yard. The flowers in the garden bloomed more than ever. Perhaps it was Lucky, not only protecting Mr. Hung, but also continuing to spread love to the place he wanted to care for the most, the next generation. The end, but not a farewell. The story of Lucky of Mr. Hung is not just the story of a small family. It becomes a source of inspiration for everyone in the village. They learn to love, understand, and cherish the simple things around them, whether it is a human or a loyal dog. In the cemetery, under the shade of an ancient tree, Lucky and Mr. Hung's graves lie side by side, forever a reminder that love and loyalty are never forgotten. Many years after Mr. Hung and Lucky passed away, the story of the friendship between him and the loyal dog became a legend passed down in the village. The name Lucky evokes inspiration, not only about loyalty, but also about the magical connection that transcends the boundaries between humans and animals. One spring day, when Lan was sitting on an old wooden chair in the schoolyard, a small dog suddenly ran out of nowhere and wrapped around her legs. The dog had smooth white fur and bright black eyes. Lan looked at it in surprise, feeling something familiar. The dog kept wrapping around her, wagging its tail non-stop, as if wanting to follow her everywhere. Gradually, the small dog became a part of Lan's life. She named it Hope. Hope as a way to thank Lucky and continue Mr. Hung's story. Hope, like Lucky, was very special. It was always sensitive to the emotions of Lan and the students in the school. When it sees someone sad, it gently comes over and rubs its head against their feet, as if to comfort them. One day, while Lan and Hope were cleaning Mr. Hung's old warehouse, where they had found the wooden box years ago, Hope suddenly dug in a corner of the floor. Lan curiously pulled out the pile of old things and discovered a secret compartment underneath. Inside was a small wooden box, similar to the one they had found before. Opening the box, Lan found an old, discolored notebook. This was Mr. Hung's diary, recording his final thoughts. In each trembling line, he wrote about his love for his family, his longing for his wife, and especially his gratitude to Lucky, the friend who had always been by his side during his loneliest days. Lan turned to the last pages, her eyes stopped at the words, "If one day Lucky is no longer here, believe that its love is still here, through every wind, every ray of sunshine, every peaceful moment. As long as your heart still remembers it, Lucky will forever be a part of our family." Lan smiled slightly, tears welling up, but not because of sadness, but because of happiness. Hope sat next to her, tilted his head to look at her, as if understanding what she was feeling. From that day on, Lan decided to build a small garden in the schoolyard, where everyone could sit and rest, relax. She named the garden Lucky Garden, to remember the dog who devoted his whole life to love and loyalty. The garden became a special place in the school. Every time the students felt tired or needed a place to reflect, they would come here, sit under the shade of the trees, listen to the birds chirping, and feel the gentle breath of nature. Many people say that when they are in the garden, they always feel a strange sense of peace, as if Lucky is still there, silently caring for and protecting everyone. A connection that never ends. Lan often watches Hope running around in the garden, feeling grateful for what life has brought her. She knows that Lucky has left a legacy greater than anything material, a lesson in unconditional love, in listening to the silent calls of the heart, and in the power of attachment between humans and their loyal four-legged friends. The story of Lucky, of Hope, of Mr. Hung and Lan's family continues, not as a closed story, but as a circle of love that never stops flowing. There, Lucky is not just a dog, but a symbol of eternity in love and loyalty. Many years later, the small village where Mr. Hung used to live has changed a lot. The small school named Hope has now expanded with more spacious classrooms, but the Lucky Garden still lies quietly in a corner of the schoolyard, green and peaceful as the first day. Lan, now the principal of the school, always tells the students that this garden is a place where people can find comfort and connection. Under the large tree in the garden, a small stone statue is erected, depicting a loyal dog lying next to an open book. Below the statue, the words are engraved, "Lucky, loyal friend, a love that never fades." Unexpected encounter. One afternoon, while Lan was walking in the garden, she heard light footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw a strange woman leading a large yellow dog. The woman smiled. "Hello, are you Lan?" Lan nodded, a little surprised. The woman introduced herself as Mai, a writer who was collecting material to write about special stories revolving around the relationship between humans and animals. Mai said that she had heard about Lucky's story from a friend who lived nearby, and it had made her unable to stop thinking about it. Lan invited Mai to sit down on a chair under a large tree. She recounted every detail about Lucky, about Mr. Hung, and how hope had miraculously appeared in her life. Throughout the story, Mai's yellow dog, named Sunshine, lay obediently beside her, its eyes seeming to listen to every word. Mai sat silently for a long time, then said, "Your story really touched me. I believe that Lucky has left a mark not only on her family, but also on everyone who heard about it." Before leaving, Mai promised to rewrite Lucky's story so that more people could feel the valuable lesson of loyalty and unconditional love. Gifts from the past. A few weeks later, Mai returned to Hope School with a special gift, a leather-bound book containing the manuscript of Lucky's story. She told Lan, "This is the first draft. I want you to read it before I publish it." Lan held the book, her heart filled with emotion. That night, under the yellow light in her office, she read each page, each line, as if she were reliving the most beautiful and touching moments of her life. The book not only told about Lucky, but also cleverly interwoven the story of hope, the small garden, and the students who found comfort there. When she reached the last page, Lan came across a tribute from the author, dedicated to Lucky, the dog who taught us that love never dies, but only changes shape to continue to exist, and dedicated to all those who have ever loved. Lan closed the book and looked out the window. The big tree in Lucky's garden swayed in the wind, nodding in agreement. An everlasting legacy. The book about Lucky quickly became a phenomenon, not only in the village but also spread everywhere. People came to Haivom School, not only to admire Lucky's garden, but also to learn lessons from that touching story. To each person, Lucky is not just a dog. It is a symbol of love, sacrifice, and connection, things that people sometimes unintentionally forget in their busy lives. Lan, standing in the middle of the green garden, saw students running and jumping, laughter echoing everywhere. In that moment, she knew that Lucky was still here, not only in her memories, but in every gust of wind, every ray of sunlight shining through the tree canopy, and in the hearts that had heard its story. Lucky's story never ends. It continues to live in each person, every step, every smile, just like the immortality of love and loyalty. Many years later, the small village has changed a lot, but the story of Lucky is still told forever, becoming an indispensable part of everyone's memory. Students who grew up at Haivom School often return, bringing their children to Lucky's garden, pointing to the statue of the loyal dog and telling the story of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Lan, now middle-aged, still often walks in the garden every early morning. She sits down on the familiar wooden chair, watching the sunlight through the tree canopy, and feels a warm breath beside her. Even though Lucky and Mr. Hung have been gone for a long time, she has never felt that they are truly gone. One afternoon, when the sunset dyed the garden golden, Lan quietly stood in front of Lucky's statue, placing a white flower on its foot. She softly said, "Thank you, Lucky, for everything. Thanks to you, we understand that love never disappears. It only transformed into light, spreading to wherever the human heart touched." In that moment, a gentle wind blew, making the leaves sway. Lan smiled, feeling as if Lucky was still watching her, forever an indispensable part of her life and everyone else's. Lucky Garden continues to be a place to preserve dreams and hopes, a place where everyone finds peace of mind. The story of Lucky, of Mr. Hung, and of Haivom School does not end, but continues to spread far and wide, as a reminder that loyalty and unconditional love are always the most beautiful and immortal things in the world. And there, Lucky lives forever, in memories, in hearts, and in every gentle breeze that blows through the garden.